he came from samurai stock. That means that they were at the very top echelon of Japanese society. His father wanted him to become a doctor, but he was a tall, beautiful man, and very strong-willed inside. But the Japanese don't come out, and they're not open and direct about things. It was all kept inside. And his father said to him, "You're going to become a doctor." So he went in to write the entrance exam. He sat behind the desk because his father had said, "You're going to write this exam." He didn't lift his pen. He waited for the 2 hours or however long it was going to be, and he walked out. He got 0, and he never went to medical school. Instead, he joined the Foreign Service, and he was sent to Russia, where he learned Russian. Just have a look here on the right-hand side. If you can just give me 2 minutes, I just want to give a quick introduction.
5 minutes.
Even 5 minutes. There used to be a wall in front over here, which I've got photographs of, that's now been taken away now that it's a museum, just here along the pavement. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. He then joined the Foreign Service, was sent to Russia, and because he had learned Russian, the Japanese, who in fact were allies of the Nazis, sent Sugihara to Kovna, to Kaunas. And this is where they sent him. This is the very building in which he and his wife Yukiko and their family lived in Kovna, and they also ran the consulate from this place. Why did the Japanese send a consul to Kovna, to Lithuania? Because as we know in politics, there's always everybody spying on everybody else. Even though he's your friend, you still want to have information about what he's doing. And the Japanese were concerned about what the Nazis were doing in Europe and where they were moving. And he was sent here to look at movements of German troops' plan. The plan was that if you could get an entrance visa, or if you could show that you could go into another country in the world, no, we're coming to transit visas in a minute. If you could go to a place in the world which would accept you, then they said to Sugihara, "Could you give us a transit visa so that we're not going to go to Japan. We will go to Japan in transit to somewhere else." And these boys, how they found it, I don't know, but they found that Curacao, near the United States, you only needed the consent of the governor, but you didn't need any documentation. So they said, the guys talk in the yeshiva. But it's just one of those amazing things in history. So they said to him like this. They said, "We haven't got any paperwork from the governor, but you don't need paperwork for Curacao. All we're asking you to do is to give us a transit visa to go to Japan." He cabled Japan 3 times. And I went to meet with the Japanese ambassador in Pretoria. About a year ago, I did a function with the Japanese embassy and the Jewish community, where we celebrated the life of Chuene Sugihara, and we lit candles. And I called on 3 Rabbonim in the community to come forward who had been saved, whose families had been saved. All of them were Americans, and they'd been saved. Rabbi Goldman from Sydenham Shul, Rabbi Levi Weinberg from Chabad, and another Rav from Johannesburg. His name's not coming to at the moment. His wife, her father was a man by the name of Shmuel Orlansky, and I have a photocopy of the original transit visa that was signed by Sugihara in our home in Johannesburg. I'll make a copy of it and I can send it to you. He cabled Japan 3 times, and I saw the cables. The ambassador showed me the documentation in the embassy. They never replied. And he decided with his wife that we're going to go ahead and we're going to issue the transit visas. They wrote out in all 6,000 visas, and many of them were multiple visas. In other words, it would allow a family to go with remember we said earlier, like the passports, that will be a mother with 3 kids, or whatever it was. And within a period of, I think it was about 6 weeks, they wrote out day and night. They did not sleep. The men of the Mira Yeshiva were standing, can you see the road up ahead of you? They were standing in a long line over here, right outside, on the pavement, on the sidewalk that you see over here. They were standing here and nobody made a noise. They all were completely quiet, and I've got photographs of them with their suits, with their hats, and they were just standing quietly. They didn't make a nuisance of themselves, and he just looked out the window. And he said to his wife, "These people have committed no crime. I am not going to wait for the Japanese government to tell me what to do. Let's start working." And by hand, not with typewriters because there wasn't time to type, by hand they started writing them out day and night. And ironically, they had a German guy that was a secretary for them that was working here, and he too was signing the visas. And he said, I hope that one day you'll remember me for what I've done, that I was a German that signed the visas. They never found him after the war. We don't know what happened, if he got killed in the war, whatever it was. Today, ladies and gentlemen, there are 40,000 Jews in the world because of those 6,000 passports. I went to Japan, I went to Yatsu, which is the town in which Sugihara was born, and today he's become a celebrated figure in Japan. He died an absolute pauper. He was fired from the foreign service, but the Japanese, because they're so sneers, they didn't say you're fired, they simply said nothing. And he applied for a job and there was nothing that was forthcoming. His family became destitute. He eventually said, well, look, the only thing I can do is I can speak Russian. So he went to work for a Russian company in Moscow, and he was absolutely impoverished. He used to send back a few rubles every month to support his family. And once, I've got it on video, his son came to visit him, and he had a little primer stove which he cooked a piece of sausage and one potato in his bathroom toilet, because he didn't have a kitchen, for him and his son to have a piece of potato and a sausage, because that was the most expensive and the most beautiful food that he could buy for his son. 2 or 3 years before he was nifter, Zechrone Tzadik Kodesh Livrocha, and a man that was saved by him in the war traced him, and he went to Japan because he was talking to survivors, and they said, what happened to Sugihara? We've got to find the man. So he went into Japan, and Sugihara changed his name to Sugiwara, because he was so embarrassed that his name was Sugihara and that he thought it would only cause problems for the family. And that's why he battled to find him. He found him, I think it was 2 or 3 years before he died, and he said, please, Mr. Sugihara, he said, we need to thank you. I need to thank you for 40,000 people in the world today. And he said, do what is right because it is right, and leave it alone. I didn't do this for reward. I don't want anything. So they said to him, so the man said to him, please, he implored on him, he said, please, you've got to give us an opportunity to pay back. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, I have one son that I haven't been able to educate. He wants to become an engineer. Can you take him to Israel? And they brought him to Israel, and he studied at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and for 4 years he was supported by the survivors of Sugihara, and he became an engineer.
What year was that?
I can't remember exactly the year. They then brought out, he was nifter, they brought out his wife and daughter and some of the grandchildren, and they brought them to the Mira Yeshiva, because the whole Mira Yeshiva was saved. It was the only yeshiva in the whole of Europe that was saved intact. The whole Mira Yeshiva was saved by this man over here, in addition to a whole lot of other Polish refugees that had come over the border into Kovna. When they got to Kovna, they said, we didn't believe that there was such a Jewish community on earth. The Polish Jews didn't understand. They said, what kind of, you remember we were talking about Slobodka, that kind of the personality you were developing here, the royalty that you were talking about? When they got to Kovna, they said, we never thought that such Jews existed in the world. And they went across to Kobe in Japan, they went to Shanghai, and then from Shanghai they went to Eretz Yisrael. So they took the wife and the children and the grandchildren to the Mir Yeshiva. I have documented, I have the footage.
Mir Yeshiva in Israel.
In Mir Yeshiva in Israel, I have it documented. One of the Rosh Yeshiva with a white beard and a hat and a white shirt and a suit was bending over her with tears running down his face. He said, Mrs. Sugihara, I'm not only thanking you for saving my life, I'm thanking you on behalf of my late mother for giving all of us an opportunity to raise our families in America. And there are 40,000 people that I'm thanking you for today. Bless you, Mrs. Sugihara. And she started crying, and her granddaughter started crying, and her daughter. And they paid tribute to her. And the late Sugihara, may his memory be a blessing, is the man that was over here. He passed away, and he's the only Japanese man on earth that was ever called one of the righteous Gentiles, Chasida Umata Olam. So that's what we're doing here today, ladies and gentlemen, just to remember Sugihara, Chuene, and Yokiko Sugihara.
Can I just add to that? Sorry, I'm not going to be as eloquent as Hugh, because nobody can be, but I just want to pick up that story and say that one of the very last visas, truly the last visas, was issued to my mother's cousin, and a man who's still alive today, Mr. Benny Fishoff in New York, who's a very dear friend and all of his children. came back, and he was one of the Polish ones who managed to have one of the last visas, and the other one was Lazar Hendelis from Los Angeles, who married. So these two young boys came into Shanghai as refugees, and the refugees were taken in by the Sephardic community, which was very great and very affluent and established in Shanghai. My mother, our mother, my mother, God bless her, was born and raised in Shanghai, and recalls that the refugees were all invited for Shabbos. They were the yeshiva boys that came for just sustenance and assistance, and they had like all the organizations that just helped to establish these people. And until the British passports, which was my mother's family, were taken into the ghettos over there, and they were interned. So actually, the Mir Yeshiva and all of the refugees that came to Shanghai did better off than the locals, after all. But in any case, there was a meeting at one of these Shabbos Yantiv tables between one of those Bachrim and my mother's first cousins, and they married. So that was also a very unheard of situation until that point, where Sephardic married Ashkenaz, and that was Mazel and Lazar Hendelis, who live in Los Angeles, and that is part of the history.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, I think we must leave the bus now. We can talk. It's getting quite hot over here. Let's get out the bus. We can talk inside the museum. It's a lot cooler.
Hello.
No.
They were also in Shanghai.
Oh, really?
Hello.
We have part of these.
Yeah.
The Ashkenaz.
We're going to be here for half an hour.
She was born in
Shanghai.
Yeah.
We went back.
The Boimel. Have you heard of the Boimel family?
Yes.
But also from In 1939 to 1940, the building housed the Consulate of Japan. Consul Sugihara, savior of Jews, held his office here, in this house. And along this, it wasn't paved like this, but here where all the Bochum from the Mir Yeshiva and Polish refugees lined up for Sugihara to handwrite the transit visas.